So the cash bail system in Oregon means that when a person is charged with a crime, one of the first decisions that the court has to make is whether that person stays in jail while their case is pending or whether the person is released from jail. While the judge is making that decision, there's two different ways that a judge can release someone from jail. They can give the person a conditional release, which says you don't have to pay any money, but you do have to follow a specific set of rules. And if you don't follow those rules, you have to go back to jail while your case is pending. The other system is cash bail. So that means that the judge says, in order to be released from custody, you have to pay money and you have to follow this set of rules that we're going to give you for while you're on release, while your case is pending. And it's that side of things that's really problematic, because for people who are indigent defendants who don't have money for a lawyer, they can't afford to pay that money to get out of jail. A wealthy person isn't any less dangerous to our community than a person living in poverty. They just happen to have the money to pay for their freedom. And a problem with a bail schedule is it doesn't take into account those individual characteristics. So if you look at somebody who makes a lot of money every month, if you tell them they have to pay 10% of $1,000, that's no problem. But if you tell somebody like one of our clients who's a homeless person, who's facing a Class C misdemeanor because they stole food that they couldn't afford, paying $1,000 bail means that they don't get out of jail. So if you tell a person, I can get you a trial in 60 days, but if you take a deal, you're going to be out in 5. Most people, innocent or not, aren't going to decide to stay in jail for that extra amount of time because you're not free. Jail is not a fun place to be. Jail is not a hotel. Jail is a punishment. And if you put somebody in that position of punishment before they're found guilty, it puts a lot of pressure on them in how they make decisions in their case. How often does that become an issue where those constitutional claims are not brought up because the individual is pleading guilty in order to get out of jail? That happens a lot. And so in a lot of cases, one of the things that the defense attorney does when they go and meet with a person, they talk to them, here's what you're charged with, here's what the case is about, here's what the police reports say, and here are the issues I see. It's part of our job to look through what the police officers did and identify where they made mistakes. Because the Constitution is what creates the foundational laws of this country. The police, just like everybody else, are required to follow constitutional laws, which means you don't get to search somebody without a warrant unless you have a valid exception to the warrant requirement. And all of these other foundational pieces of the law where maybe that law wasn't followed, but the defendant has to make a decision. Do I want to call the police out on violating that constitutional right that I have, or do I want to get out of jail? And a lot of the time the answer is, I want to get out of jail. The biggest fallout that I see from people who can't afford bail is that they become part of a cycle. And so people who plead guilty, pleading guilty means something. It means you end up with a criminal conviction. And once you have a criminal conviction, that makes life a lot harder for you once you're out of jail. You're looking at challenges with housing, challenges with getting a job, challenges in your social circles, especially depending on what type of crime we're talking about. So there's a lot of collateral consequences that a person ends up having to live with because they made the decision that they wanted to plead guilty in order to get out of jail. And once you're a part of the system where you have that label of being a convicted criminal, you're more likely to reoffend, because if you can't find housing, you're probably more likely to trespass at the park to find a place to sleep. If you can't find a job, you're probably more likely to steal to take care of yourself and your family. So you get into these cycles, especially with people who are suffering from mental illness, who are just coming in and out of jail and picking up more and more crimes because they have less opportunities available to them once they've been labeled a convicted criminal. Other systems could be used instead of asking people to pay bail that would not only be cheaper than keeping people in jail, but they would do a better job at protecting our community. And so one of the things that the district attorney's office is trying out right now, that hopefully is a program that gets a lot of traction, is called the JRI program, where they invest the time for a supervising officer to check in with somebody, and they decide whether that needs to be weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, where they're having an officer check in with that person and basically supervise them while they're on release to make sure that they're following their rules. That's exactly what we need to be happening. If you want somebody to follow the rules, have somebody check in, make sure they're doing it. And that's a good program to be able to do that. But we could expand that program more, and it would be cheaper than how expensive it is to keep somebody at jail. There are other things that we can do that are sometimes tools used as part of those conditional release agreements. You can put somebody on a monitor on their ankle that makes sure that they don't consume any alcohol, a GPS monitor. Those things are really hard for indigent defendants right now because they ask the defendant to pay the daily cost of that. But it would certainly be cheaper for our community to pay for the cost of those devices than it would be to pay to keep somebody in jail.